We've done videos in the past about like the top 10 submissions and high potency takedowns. We've talked about a lot of very reliable ways to go about striking, and even gone into the weapons thing. But one of the things that we haven't talked about is essentially just the basic principle behind how to definitively win a fight. And this actually is pretty important at a conceptual level. And the biggest reason for this is because we get stuck in either the hypotheticals of real world violence, which is actually extremely rare. And unless you are in a violence profession job, like being a soldier, a cop, an armed security guard, a contractor, something like that, or you live on the wrong side of the law, like violence just doesn't happen in the real world all that much. I mean, violent crime statistics, even if they're underreported, by like an order of magnitude, are, it's low, right? So for a lot of us, the idea of what goes into winning a fight is really either based on just general suppositions and hypotheticals, or it's based on combat sports. I mean, I suppose some people may end up basing them on stories of old honor culture and whatnot, where somebody just concedes, forfeits the fight because they've been bested. But the fact is that if that was ever a true thing, that really kind of has gone by the wayside. So we can't rely on that. And the thing with combat sports is that in all combat sports, all of them, every single one of them, I'm sure there are exceptions, but for the most part, what I'm saying, right, is universally speaking, there are going to be artificial constrictions on the rules, which are going to constrict your ability to win a fight in a certain way. So, barring that, right, barring things like scoring points, because scoring points doesn't exist in the real world, right? Scoring points is not a definitive way to win a fight. And the reason that I say that is we have seen so many last second turnarounds, in MMA and kickboxing and whatnot, where somebody was basically coming in from behind. They were losing the fight based on point scores or whatever, but one thing happened and they got a knockout, or they got a submission or something like that, right? You could be just behind, and statistically losing the fight and still turn it around. And that actually happens more often than you might think. This is not some rare thing. So that being the case, scoring points is not a definitive way to win a fight. And that's why anytime that I have bothered to craft up rule sets, I do not use a point system, with the exception of weapons, because it's just a matter of functionality with weapons. You have to score points with weapons because we can't actually use weapons the way they're intended, because of both legal and just general cultural reasons. Like, nobody is going to tolerate actual cutting, stabbing, and broken bones and whatnot in the name of proving who's a better swordsman or stick fighter or whatever. So there's the exception for weapons. And I do think that points are okay for children's competition if you're going to do that, because children should be not getting massive amounts of CTE or anything like that. So not only do I think kids should basically be starting with wrestling anyway, but for the most part, kids probably should not be doing full contact striking. However, look, once you're an adult, if you're venturing into the realm of no holds barred grappling, full contact striking, and mixed martial arts, then you need to understand that there's really only one definitive way to know that you won the fight, right? This is like the one proxy for the real world, where combat sports equals real world, and that is you make the other guy unconscious. That is the most definitive way to know that you won a fight, because when the other guy is unconscious, he is mechanically not able to fight you. And so unconscious obviously can mean anything from a flash knockout, which in modern MMA and everything, like a knockout looks like a knockout. It doesn't matter if it was a flash in the pan. I mean, unless the guy rebounds right up to his feet, in which case still referee discretion. But for the most part, everything from a flash knockout all the way up to termination, you end up, the lack of consciousness is proof of concept. You won the fight. Lack of consciousness means that if you are in a self-defense situation, you absolutely have the room to escape. And if escape wasn't an option, it means that you have definitively won, to the point where, like, if they're unconscious, you have now a compliant person to either restrain or to, move away from, whatever. Again, depending on how ultimately unconscious they are. But yes, unconsciousness is the number one way to win a fight. And that goes for grappling too, right? And there's a reason the rear naked choke is the number one choke and is, the number one submission in MMA. You go to, limb locks for, submission grappling, but that's another story. For MMA, it's the rear naked choke. And, chokes have a very, very high rate of success. And a lot of that is just because, like, if somebody is not getting oxygen to their brain, they're going to pass out. If somebody can't breathe, they can't fight you. And we all know that air chokes aren't as good as blood chokes, but they still work, right? They're just not as efficient. And so the point is that if you can render somebody unconscious, that is your surest proof of concept that you have won the fight. Now, unfortunately, rendering somebody unconscious with striking or with throwing usually is accompanied by concussions. And obviously as adults, even playing sports and whatnot, like, we want to mitigate some of that. Even though it's called combat sports, we still are not really trying to make somebody completely disabled in life. But unfortunately, like, what we're doing is not safe. I mean, we're all a little bit crazy doing this because we're pursuing something that's not particularly safe. But it's fun and it makes sense and it satisfies something in our caveman DNA. Now, I will give you this. There is a second option that is, it's second tier. It's a good second place. It's not perfect, but it's pretty high rate of success. And that is disabling your opponent, mechanically disabling your opponent. And again, just like there is a spectrum of what unconsciousness means, there's a spectrum of what disabling somebody means. Disabling somebody on a mechanical level, right, means that you are taking away critical function, for normal function of whatever they're trying to do. And, that could mean something like, that could honestly be something as simple as causing so much pain that their legs no longer work. Boss Rutan won a fight by leg kicking a guy, 14 times or something, and he ended up basically submitting because his leg couldn't take the pain anymore. I mean, that is a physical disablement. Now, can you rely on that in the real world? No, but the fact is, like, at the lowest level of what disablement means, like, it means that, right? You cause somebody so much pain that they're like, I can't stand up anymore, I can't function anymore, I cannot function at a normal level, thus I am done. And this could go all the way up to actually straining and damaging joints and tissues. This can go up to actually breaking bones and, ripping, cutting, severing tissues. And so mechanical disablement, I mean, that's a reason why in, knife and sword, any kind of bladed weapon systems, and honestly, even impact weapon systems, hands are primary targets. The reason that hands are primary targets is because if you have a weapon and the other guy has a weapon and you take away his ability to wield that weapon because his hands are destroyed, you've basically won the fight, because the difference between you being armed and him being unarmed is vast. And the difference between him being unarmed and having his hands disabled is even more vast, because we are handsy creatures, right? So short of making somebody unconscious, making somebody's hands not function is a very, very useful thing. And if you take away their ability to move, i.e. hips, knees, ankles, feet, you are doing a great amount in order to basically win the fight, right? If you make it so that somebody can't move, cannot function with their hands, which, let's face it, the hands are very, very primary to what we do. So again, there's that whole range of disabling opponent, mechanically disabling opponent. But if you mechanically disable somebody, via pain, structural damage, all the way up to like maiming, permanent damage, which, save that for real situations, right? We don't need to do that in combat sports. Again, there's a longevity and it's just a sport argument there. But that's what we're talking about, right? So these are the two ways, and there's really not there's not even a close third, right? There's really not a close third. Submissions are honestly not even a good proxy for disabling somebody. I mean, theoretically they should be, but because people don't practice submissions as disabling moves, they practice them in such a controlled way that it's hard to say. And the problem is that, and here's the reason the disablement is number two. There are so many stories. I'm not going to link anything because I don't know that I have any news sources. But I mean, talk to military guys. Every time you talk to a military guy who's actually seen active duty, not a guy that drove truck or sat in the mess hall or was an officer, nobody cares about them. They don't count. But if you talk about somebody who actually saw active duty and everything, you're gonna hear stories from guys who took massive amounts of damage and continued on and either were able to support the mission or just to complete the mission as is and continued on. I've heard at least one story of a guy breaking his pelvis and still going. If you want a more civilian example, look, we've got 3 great examples from the wrestling world. Number one, probably most famous one, Kurt Angle. Before he was a pro wrestler, when he was an Olympic wrestler, broke his neck in the Olympics, finished his match on a broken neck, won gold, and then went and got medical attention. Broken neck, and he still finished the match winning gold. So you can't rely on mechanical disablement. Stone Cold Steve Austin also broke his neck. I don't remember what it was. It might have been a pile driver or something. It's always a pile driver, right? And I believe he said he drove himself to the hospital, and they're like, oh yeah, you've got, and they're like, oh yeah, you've got a fractured vertebrae. Now, I don't know how broken it was, but the fact is that, he went and got it looked at, but he drove himself to the hospital. And my favorite one from ECW, this was Taz. Now, a lot of you may be young enough or just didn't, aren't into pro wrestling, you didn't watch ECW back in the day. Taz doesn't have a neck. Taz is a head on top of traps on top of a torso, right? He basically doesn't have a neck. But the thing is that during a match, he broke his neck. He knew something was wrong, but he went on and completed the match. Now look, this is pro wrestling, things are scripted, outcomes are scripted. So there's not like a winning or anything like that. It's just, you're performing your duties and completing the mission and going. He apparently walked to the hospital because the hospital was just a couple of blocks away. And when he got in and got the x-ray, they're like, oh, you've got a broken neck. Or, wait, how did you get here? I didn't see anybody with you. Did you drive yourself? No, I walked here. You walked here? How are you walking? You have a broken neck, right? So again, 3 cases of broken neck, one in which they were like, how are you walking? And a guy was still able to complete the mission. Like I said, I've heard of a story, of a guy with a broken pelvis. This is one of the things we talk about, when you kick the groin, you're not actually aiming to hurt the testicles, or anything like that. You're actually aiming to break the pelvis. The problem is that's not surefire. Now, look, is busting the knee so they can't stand on it a little more surefire? Yeah, probably, but not wholly, right? Busting the shin, like you see in so many Muay Thai videos, again, is that more likely to be a concluding factor in the match? Yeah, probably, because it's going to be really hard for them to effectively fight hobbling around on one leg. In some ways, a broken pelvis is actually less critical than a broken shin bone or a completely destroyed knee. So, grains of salt there. But, I mean, broken feet, broken pelvis, people have worked on those all the time. I've worked on a broken foot before. I've worked on a broken rib before. It sucks, but you can kind of work around it. So especially for people that are like, well, if you just break their nose and their eyes will water and you've basically won the fight. No. Anytime that somebody's gotten punched in the face in a fight, they've pretty much broken their nose and they go on to continue. I mean, it's just like broken noses are a dime a dozen. They are not fight enders. You're not going to win a fight that way. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the Bruce Lee thing, right? Bruce Lee was somewhat famous for saying that if you take away somebody's eyes, their ability to breathe, and their ability to move, you've basically won the fight. Like, those are the critical components. At least that's my understanding. I am not a Bruce Lee scholar. That's fairly true, right? But how well you do that depends, right? Like, on the one side, all the time, we see eye pokes and groin shots basically call off an entire MMA match because it's too critical of an injury, and they'll just DQ the match, right? Or no contest the match and reschedule for later or something like that. A lot of that is the artificiality of rules. But the fact is, like, eye pokes, groin strikes, windpipe shots do work. Like, they do work. It always bugs me when combat sports guys are like, "Oh, you'll just piss the guy off." Well, I mean, yeah, probably, but also it does give you an advantage. You're causing damage to vital spots that will give you at least one free move, and that free move could become a cascade effect leading to positions of dominance and whatnot. So don't for a second think that just because MMA guys are saying, well, eye gouges and groin shots don't work. Well, they do. They absolutely do. The problem is, do they work well enough to conclude a fight? And the answer is, it really depends. It depends on who you're fighting, what mental state they're in, what chemical state they're in, just their personal tolerances, whatever their inborn tolerances are. I mean, so many things like that. Pain is so unreliable, and that's why, like I was saying, like the example of Boss Rutten with the leg kicks is like, it's a cool story, but that's kind of an unreliable thing. I mean, one guy might take 14 leg kicks, another guy might take 373 leg kicks before he's done. Who knows? So the point is that you have to be pretty judicious, and you have to be pretty shot aware of what actual physical mechanical disablement is going to look like. But anyway, that's it. I feel like I've probably rambled on enough, told some stories and whatnot. The overall point, right? Let's recap here. There are two primary ways, first place and second place, and really no third place. Definitive ways to say that you have won a fight. That is unconsciousness and mechanical disablement. You either render somebody unconscious so that they are no longer able to be agent, or you render somebody mechanically disabled so that they are no longer able to actually just function, whether or not they are conscious. There are shades and spectrums to all of this, but those are the ways that you win a fight. All right, I will talk to you guys later. Good journey. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, share. Check us out on our other socials, and please head over to blacksunboxing.com to get a little more info, including how to contact us. Furthermore, if you are in the Phoenix area, please feel free to stop in, say hi, join in for a class, whatever. Also, if you ever see us cite sources or just for additional content, please check out our Substack. That is where we put all of the sources we use in our videos and is a major part of this. Plus, it serves as a membership platform for long distance learning and for people who would like to support us but aren't local. We would greatly appreciate it if you signed up. Even just the free membership helps us out a lot. All right, I will see you guys in the next video. Good journey.